Hello, deep learners. I'm Andrew Ng, founder of DeepLearning.ai, and I'm excited to welcome you to our global deep learning community. I know that many of you are here today because you want to break into AI and build your career. I hope that being part of this community will help you to do so. To give you a proper welcome, I'd like to show you around the DeepLearning.ai offices and meet some of the teams so that you can see where it all happens.
Oh, hi, Andrew.
Do you want to tell our friends at Pine AI what you do at DeepLearning.ai?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I make articles.
To give you a
and
proper
other
welcome,
media
I'd like to show you around
help
the
people
DeepLearning.ai
learn about AI and help them
offices
understand
and meet some of the
huge
teams
impact
so that you
that
can
AI is
see
having.
where it all happens.
Today, I'm putting
Oh,
together
hi, Andrew.
the next issue
Do you want to
Batch
tell our
of
friends at
News
Pine
Letter
AI
News,
what
and
you
I'm
do at
looking for the
DeepLearning.ai?
biggest stories
Hi,
of the week
everyone.
I make articles.
To give you a
and
proper
reviews
welcome,
and
I'd like to show you around
help
the
people learn
DeepLearning.ai
about AI and how much AI
offices and meet some of the teams so that you can.
You might think from the outside that machine learning engineers really understand everything about AI, but nobody understands everything about AI because this field is just coming to life right before my eyes as I put this thing together every week.
All right, I know you're really busy, so I'll let you get back to it.
Thanks. See you later.
Let's go meet Kian, who helped me create the deep learning specialization. He's working on an exciting new project. Hey Kian, so do you want to tell the people at Pine AI what you're working on?
Yes, sure. I'm leading a project called Workera, focusing on helping people get offers in AI and navigating their career by testing their skills, preparing for interviews and certifying them, as well as matching and referring them to good jobs in AI.
That's really cool. And what's the most exciting part of your day?
You know, the AI field is new, organizations and jobs are still misunderstood. So I'm excited to help people understand what different types of jobs exist in the field, what tasks they will work on, and what skills are needed to achieve those tasks.
That's really important work. Well, it's nice chatting. And now let's go chat to Hotel, who is on their product team.
Hey, Andrew.
Do you want to say hi to our friends at Pine AI and let them know what you're working on?
I would love to. Hi, everyone. I lead the product team in DeepLearning.ai, where we create AI education content accessible to people all around the world. People like you.
And what are you most excited about right now?
I am so excited to see our community grow and to see how eager people are to learn more about AI.
Thanks, Hotel.
Thanks, Andrew.
So, as you can see, our team is working hard to support you and help you learn. It's never been easier than before to break into AI. So if you want to build a career, you can leverage online resources available, including open source code, datasets, papers, and online courses like a deep learning specialization on Coursera. As part of this journey, I hope you get your hands dirty too. Don't be afraid of diving in to build your own project, or go ahead and try to replicate a research paper that you're excited about. One thing that I've seen help a lot of people succeed is if you can build a community or find a community of fellow deep learners you can meet with and study with on a regular basis. In fact, I hope that this Pine AI meetup that you're at right now will be a good place for you to meet these people. I hope you enjoyed the event today and that you learn a lot both from the talks and from each other. And once again, welcome to the DeepLearning.ai community.
Hello again. Hope you enjoyed the video. So I'll be calling Mr. Maitriyan right now. He's, like I said, he's a TensorFlow user group co-organizer and ExploreML facilitator. He has wide experience of speaking at tech conferences relating machine learning and TensorFlow and everything like that. So I'll just add him on Google Meet.
Yeah.
Hello, can you hear me, Maitra?
Yes. Am I audible?
Yeah, you are.
Hello.
Hello, hello.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'm here. Shall I start to present my screen?
Yeah, sure, you can start.
Yeah.
Hello, can you hear me, Maitra?
Yes. Okay. Just to make sure, am I clear? Am I audible? Audience, please reply in the YouTube chat. It would be quite comfortable for me. Shall I start? Shall we start? Bro, shall we start?
1 minute, I think they can't hear you. Yeah, they can hear you. Yeah, you can go ahead. There's a delay, a slight delay in YouTube.
Yeah, I get it. Okay. Thanks for tuning in now. So today we'll be covering upon the basics of neural networks. So deep learning.ai course completely does based upon neural networks and advanced types of neural networks. So in this session we'll be covering the basics of neural networks and we'll be having a small hands-on in the end. And in the meantime we'll be understanding what's actually happening inside it and the importance of neural networks that actually have in our day-to-day life, how much it is affecting us in our day-to-day life, and how it has evolved in the past few decades. All these things would be seen in today's session. Hope you are interested, and let's begin the session. So, to give a small overview, I am Maitran Kesavan. I'm a co-founder and CEO of Polydimensional, which is an educational platform, and I'm also a Google AI Explore ML facilitator. And I also organize TensorFlow User Group Coimbatore, co-organize it. And these are other roles that I actually do. So let's get into today's session. So in today's session, we'll be getting started with machine learning and how machine learning and deep learning differs, and some small brain analogy with neural networks, and we'll be discussing upon various parts of the neural network, and we'll also be playing around with online playground, which will give you an intuition on how actually neural network works because it will be visually showing how the different weights and bias actually values changes. So it will be quite intuitive for you. I hope most of you are quite familiar with basics of machine learning. Are most of the people comfortable with machine learning or completely new to the field of machine learning and deep learning? Just a few answers in the comment section would help me. Okay, so you might have heard this word from the person who was speaking before. AI is the new electricity. It's true, AI is transforming many industries right now. And as in the industrial revolution, electricity was the main thing that was powering machines to transform us. So everything was becoming automated. All human tasks were automated with the help of machines. The same kind of revolution is happening right now with AI. Repeatable tasks and tasks which can be done, which is kind of can be automated easily, are done in a large scale using AI. And it's almost impacting all the industries. It's not just technology. It's from medicine to self-driving cars. Every industry is almost affected or improved by AI. So, do you think AI is something that came that boomed very recently, or which is something very new? The answer is no. AI is been there for a long time. Almost relatable tasks and tasks which can be done, which is kind of. Just a second. Okay, fine. Okay, there's a small timeline of AI. So some of you might have heard about Alan Turing. So he was the one who cracked Enigma. Okay, so he also set the test called Turing test. That the Turing test means that a person would not be able to differentiate between a human and a machine. So if a machine is able to do it, it is able to pass the Turing test. It was set in 1950, and we are still working towards solving it. So as you can see, the timeline is quite long, and there is a AI winter over here. So AI started very well, and there was a boom before also. But we had many constraints which made AI not the best solution at that point of time. But as you can see, as time progresses, a lot of groundbreaking technologies were made using AI. So what do you think is what the things that blocked the growth of AI in these years? So you can see it started around the concept of most of the things that you see today, neural networks and the concept of LSTM and even advanced concepts where CNN came around in the 1990s itself. What is the reason why it took such a long time for it to mature to a level where it can be used in production and it can actually create value? So what was the thing that actually paused it for such a long time? So the primary answers are computational power and data. So you know that the amount of compute power that we have in your mobile phone right now is almost more than the power that a supercomputer had in that time. So the computational power has increased tremendously, and also the amount of data that is generated. So you know that machine learning models learn from data. So it is important that you have a sufficient amount of data to actually make useful predictions. Okay. So thanks to the internet revolution, the amount of data that we generate is tremendous and is growing exponentially. So with the rapid increase of IoT devices and other kind of sensors, the amount of data is going to even more increase, and that data would fuel the AI systems. Okay, and also the increased number of research and software tools that are available right now. Okay, so the amount of researchers, the number of papers that is submitted in NIFS and ICCV each year is increasing a lot, and the more number of people in the field of AI is growing. As you can see, so many of you attending this session itself is a sign that people are interested toward this field because it has a huge potential to transform many industries. So as more people are involved in the field, the growth is also rapid. So these are the three primary reasons for the rapid growth in the recent years. So let me put this thing very clear. So these sometimes you might be using these terms interchangeably. Just have a look at this picture. We have artificial intelligence, machine learning, and deep learning. So to put it into perspective, to start with artificial intelligence is anything that tries to mimic human intelligence. Okay, so it need not learn from data or anything. Even a hard-coded rule, okay, which is able to make the important intelligent decisions, it's AI. So you might be heard about IBM's Deep Blue. This was not actually trained using machine learning. It was AI. It was hard-coded, but it was able to make intelligent decisions. So anything that is able to mimic human intelligence is called AI. It can be hard-coded rules. It can be genetic algorithms. It can be evolutionary algorithms. There are many subfields. Okay, so you can consider AI as a broad set under which machine learning comes. The constraint that machine learning has is that machine learning has to learn from data without being explicitly programmed. You can't hard-code a decision. Okay, so you would be giving data, and the machine would be learning from the data. That's the major difference between AI and ML. Deep learning is a subset of machine learning where we use neural networks. Neural networks is a specific kind of model which is actually resembling the human brain, the structure, and it is the model or the architecture which is performing very well. Okay, in recent times, all the breakthroughs in the field of, especially in context of non-tabular data, okay, it is very effective. In tabular data, still machine learning algorithms like boosting algorithms are still quite better. But in case of unstructured data like image, video, audio, and those large paragraph of text, these are the places where deep learning outperforms other models. Okay. So you have to know that when you have to go for machine learning and when you have to go for deep learning and when you actually have to go for these kind of things. Sometimes you just can code do a normal programming. Okay, like if you are going to sort a number, you don't need a machine learning model to sort a number. You can do it using normal logic. So you should know when to actually use machine learning and when not to. Okay. So I just wanted to check whether is everything fine till now. Just drop a message in the YouTube so that I just have a feedback that everything is on track. And if I'm going a bit fast, just let me know so that I will just adjust my pace.
One more thing, Maitreyan.
Okay.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I just wanted to tell the people, right, if you have any kind of doubts or anything or any questions you want to ask to Maitreyan, you can just ask it in the chat window.
Yeah. At any point of time, if you have any doubt, please put it in the chat box. Either I will answer it on the spot or we will do it in the end of the session. Okay, fine. So as you can see, there is also a timeline under over here. So as I said, around 1950 itself, the concept of AI came. Machine learning came around the year, not exact. These are not exact years, but just to give you a rough timeline. Okay, the deep learning revolution started to take off in the year 2010. The ideas of neural networks were long back. I'll show you in the upcoming slides. But the time it started to take off was around 2010. Exactly at ImageNet competition. In 2012, ImageNet competition was held. That's the place where neural networks, especially CNN models, overtook all the other previous machine learning models. Okay, that was kind of the ImageNet movement. It's called like that. It is one of the important movements where it almost transformed the field of AI. Okay, so many people were working in the neural networks in the 1980 itself, but at those times, no one believed that it is going to actually work. Because neural networks, as you will be seeing in the upcoming slides, requires large amount of data to learn a large amount of compute. Both were not available at that point of time. So it was not feasible at that time, but some people like Geoffrey Hinton believed that it is the way to go. And finally, he got paid back for his continuous resilience and believing in neural networks. So just to give you a rough overview, neural networks came around this time itself, 1943. The idea of backpropagation came around 1970s, around this period. Backpropagation was actually discovered by Geoffrey Hinton. He's considered to be as the godfather of AI right now. He's still there and he's considered to be very high profile. And CNN, the convolution neural networks that we use for image recognition right now, dates back to the 1990s itself. But we needed a large amount of compute to get to this point. Okay. And something that came in this past decade was GANs, generative adversarial networks. All these deep fakes and the other things like making someone speak something that they actually didn't speak, doing morphing, all these things are done using GAN. It's one thing. And AlphaGo and AlphaZero, you might have heard about this. So the Go is more complex, a game which is more complex than chess. And it is considered to be quite difficult for a machine to solve. A mission created by DeepMind, which is a subsidiary company of Google. It was Alphabet, to be precise. Actually, was able to beat Lee Strudel 4:1. It is considered to be one of the breaking moments. And recently, Transformers, the BERT, and the OpenGP2 are making huge improvements in the field of natural language processing. Okay. Okay, going forward. The neural network is actually designed from the human brain system. So many inputs will be coming through it, and we'll be doing calculations and we'll be sending output like this. So we'll be discussing more in detail just to give you an outline over here. Okay. Fine. So okay, fine. So this simple classification problem that given a label set of images, you have to find whether it's a cat or dog. So first you will be given a set of images that say whether it's a cat or a dog. You will be passing it to inside the neural networks. This is the input layer and these are the hidden layers. And finally we have the output layer. So inside the hidden layers, many complex features are learned, like the structure of the nose of the cat, and the cat are quite larger than the dogs. Sorry, the dogs are quite larger than the cats, and their respective features. The thing is, we don't hard code these features. Okay, the cat has whiskers. We don't say anything. We just show it the images and ask it to learn by itself. Okay. That's to give you a small overview on what machine learning is. So the main difference between machine learning and deep learning is that in machine learning, you will be hard coding the features, hand crafting the features that has to be learned. So you'll be using feature extractors like Hog or other kind of things to actually extract particular features. After that, you will be using a machine learning model with these extracted features to actually make the predictions. In deep learning, the feature extraction part is done by the deep learning model itself. So you don't need to specify what it actually has to learn. Given a large set of images and labels, it will be able to figure it out by itself, the underlying pattern. So the one advantage that we have over deep learning is that it can actually find underlying patterns that we humans don't actually recognize. So a particular thing, deep learning model was able to recognize whether it's a male or female just by looking at the eyes. Even doctors or other professionals are not able to do it. Okay, so it has some underlying feature or pattern that we humans are not able to understand. Okay, so that's the advantage of deep learning. That's also a boon also, and we'll be discussing upon it in the upcoming slides. So just to give you an overview, on the y-axis we have the performance, on the x-axis we have the amount of data. Okay, so as you can see, as the amount of data is even in the beginning stage, all of them are kind of similar, and even traditional machine learning models are quite well performing because neural networks and especially deep neural networks require large amount of data. But as the data scales, you can see that these deep neural networks are able to outperform the other models very easily. So that's the thing, with the large amount of data that we have right now and the compute power, in most of the tasks, neural networks will be able to outperform machine learning models, but not in all the tasks. There are also few constraints. Okay. Okay, fine. Okay. So there are few constraints where machine learning models perform better than deep learning, like tabular data and where feature extraction is important. So those are scenarios, but in general, unstructured data, deep learnings are the way to go. But it's also important that you don't use deep learning for solving very simple problems. Okay, you should be using it only when it's needed. Just to give you a picture of it. Okay, sometimes the simplest solution is always the best solution. So you need not overcomplicate things. You use it when you actually need it. Okay, just to put it into perspective. Okay, let me give a comparison between machine learning models and deep learning models and when to use them. So when you have a very small amount of data, it's better to go towards machine learning. Okay, just a second. So when you have a very small data, it's better to go with machine learning models. Okay, and when the data set is large, you can go for deep learning models, especially in tabular data where like different categories. So you are given example like what are the height, weight, and the price of the kind of. Let me give an example. So you are in a store. You are given the weight of the package and the manufacturing date, and few other categories like how much categories like calories and the fat it has. So will you be able to break the price of it? Some tabular data like that, ML actually makes sense, and you can do a lot of feature engineering in those kind of data. Okay, that human actually are good at. In deep learning is suitable for like image classification, video action recognition, and generating videos, those kind of things. And one part ML actually does very well is that you can interpret the model. So in deep learning, it is very hard to interpret why actually the decision is made. Okay, in business scenarios, we require the cause and effect principle. So because of increasing a particular feature, I'm able to increase my profit. So those kind of relations are very important in machine learning. In deep learning, we majority of the time just concentrate on the outcome. In machine learning, we also can consider the interpretability and other kind of things. Okay, these are the two places where you can go for ML or DL. That's one thing. And general scenario, you can try with some machine learning models. If it's not underfitting, then you can go for deep learning. So I'll be discussing about overfitting and underfitting in the upcoming slides also. Fine. So end of the day, machine learning and deep learning comes with it comes down to linear algebra and calculus and probability. So you can start with machine learning without having a very high understanding of these concepts with the higher level APIs and libraries. But to go take it as a profession and dig deep into it, you need to understand this linear algebra and calculus and the math behind it. Okay, let's get started. So are you able to recognize the pattern between the input and the output? Any ideas? What would be the output of 38? Or you can answer in the chat. Are you able to find the relation between it, the input and the output? Okay, the input is actually Celsius and the output is in Fahrenheit. So you can see the mapping over here. So the reason is what machine learning actually tries to do is, given an input and the output, it tries to learn the underlying function. Okay, what we are trying to actually do is, we are trying to map it and try to find the underlying pattern between them. Similarly, machine learning models and deep learning models also try to learn the underlying function. Okay, end of the day, supervised models are nothing but function approximation. We try to find the function that is in the underlyingly. Okay. So before we build a deep learning model, we need some prerequisite. Okay. So deep learning models are nothing but many larger. We need to understand linear regression. From there, we will be understanding logistic regression. From there, we will be building our deep learning models, so that you will be having a clear pathway and understanding on how actually things learn. Okay. I hope everything is fine till now. Okay, this is the formula. So given the input, which is Celsius, we multiply it into 1.8 plus, and we add it plus by 32. So when the input is 0, the answer is 32, and similarly these numbers. So when the input is 38, we actually get 104. Okay, so given we actually know we know this is a Celsius to Fahrenheit problem. For a machine learning model, it doesn't know what is the underlying pattern of the function. But given an input and the output, it will be able to figure it by itself. So this is a small example of a linear regression. So what we are actually doing over here is, I hope the screen is visible to you. So we are importing NumPy, which is used for array in Python, and we are importing linear regression model. So I'm passing the input over here, which is X, and the output labels, which is Y. I'm just fitting it. As you can see, I'm getting the slope, which is 1.8, and the intercept as 31.999, which is very much close to 1.8 and 32. So in the machine learning model, it does not actually know these values, but it is able to find these values with the training examples. Okay, fine. I hope it makes sense to you, or else we'll be covering it. Okay. So our objective is, given the C and F, we are trying to find the value which we have to multiply and the value with which we have to add, which is the intercept over here and the slope over here. The slope over here and the intercept is here. This. Okay. So let's take a linear regression. So linear regression is nothing but we are trying to fit the best model possible, best fit line possible for a given data set. So the slope is the slant in which it's available. Okay. So I'll just So for a line, there are two things: slope and intercept. Slope determines the angle in which it is slanted, and the intercept determines the y-axis in which it cuts. Okay, so I'll just draw it and show to you. Okay, I'll do it later. I'll try to draw. Okay, fine, we'll continue. So let's consider these are the points that we have. Okay, so this is the independent variable which is x, and this is the dependent variable y. We are trying to fit the best line possible. Okay, so the best line possible is the line which reduces the distance between the straight line and the actual point. Okay, these are the errors, and we are trying to minimize the error. Okay, we are trying to minimize it. That's the objective. So in the beginning, the line might be something like this, some straight line over here, sometime like this. But as we are iterating and we're learning, we'll be able to fit that best line possible. Okay, so we'll be in the upcoming slides, we'll be learning how to actually get these values. Okay, okay, fine. So as I said, okay, I'll just get back to the, just wait a minute. Let's share my window. So I'll be sharing bro, I'll be just sharing my entire window so that I can draw. Okay.
Yeah, sure. Okay.
Okay, fine. I guess my entire video is seen right now. Okay. Okay, I'll just draw it and show it to you. Okay. So this x-axis and this y-axis. Okay. So sorry for the bad drawing, but just we'll carry on with it. So these are the points that we have. Okay. Our goal is to fit the best line possible. Okay, just take another color. Our goal is to fit the best line possible. So for our line, there are two things. Okay. Y is equal to mx plus b. So m is the slope in the slant of the line, and b is the intercept, which is the y intercept. Okay. So what we try to do is, in the beginning, in our scenario, okay, in our scenario, the m value was, the b value was 32, the m value was 1.8. But the machine learning model will not be able to know that 1.8 is actual value. So let's consider starting with some random value of 1, okay, and this is some random value of 72. Okay, so what it actually happens is, it tries to iterate, increase or change this value and see whether it's actually reducing the loss. So what losses in the starting, let's say we are fitting like this. So it will be calculating the distance between each point. We'll be calculating the distance between each point and the line. Okay. So this is the loss. Our objective is to reduce the overall loss. So what we'll be doing is, we'll be trying to fit a better line, so like this. Okay, that's our objective. To change the line, we have to change the value of m and p. We are going to see how we are actually going to change m and p value. Okay, that's our objective. Okay, and get the best line fit possible. Am I clear till now? Okay, just answer it in the mail. If you have any issues, please post it. Okay, fine. Okay. Fine. So here our loss is actual output is this separated output. So the loss is nothing but y minus mx plus b, the whole square, just to make this a mean squared error. Okay. So actual prediction is y. Our prediction is nothing but the m value into the Celsius value. Let's consider this Celsius, and we are going to multiply by b. Okay. So what we are going to do is, we are going to change this m value and b value and see whether we can reduce this loss function. Okay. So this is a thing called as gradient descent. So gradient descent is nothing but, let's consider you are in a hill. Okay. The objective is to get to the lowest point possible. Similarly, we are plotting the loss function with respect to weights. So the loss function is nothing but the difference between the actual output and the predicted output. Okay. And we are trying to minimize the loss by adjusting the weights. The weight value is nothing but m and b. Okay. The weight value is nothing but M and B. Just a second, sorry for the delay. Okay, fine. So thing is, so let's say this is the loss. Okay, this is the loss and this is the M value. So we know that the right M value is 1.8. In this scenario, okay, let's say this is 2.1 is the minimum point over here. For the value of this, we have the minimum loss. So in the beginning, we start over here. Okay, M is nothing but a value. So it's starting with 0. Okay, let's say it's starting with 0. It can be random. It will most of the time it's random. So what we do is we update the M value. So when we come from 0, we are updating it to 0.5. Let's a small update, a 0.1, and then we calculate the loss function. So you can see that the loss is actually reducing. So we move in that particular direction. So again, we are iterating over here, and the loss is reducing. So we are moving in that particular direction. We are increasing the value of W, so, which is M. Until one point of time, we are just moving over here, and we are reaching the minimum point. After that, when we are moving, the loss is actually increasing. Okay. So we want to move until the loss is minimum. So this is nothing but this is extra loss with respect to M. Okay. This is a loss with respect to M. Similarly, we'll do it for B also. Okay, fine. I'll just show you a visualization so that you will have a better understanding. Fine. Okay. I just restart. So here is the thing. So this losses are M value, and this is the minimum value, minimum loss thing. Okay, we are going to change the M value and get the minimum loss possible. So what we do is learning rate will be covering later. So we start to iterate. Every time we iterate, we are trying to move towards the minimum point, which is the local. It's called the minima. Okay, there are two things called as local minima and global minima. We'll be looking into it. So you see that each time I am iterating, my M value, I'm changing my M value. In turn, my loss is getting reduced. Okay. So you can see that since my learning rate is 0.2, it takes a lot of time to converge and find the minimum point. I'll just do one thing. I'm going to increase my learning rate. I'll just say what learning rate is in some time. Okay. Now I'm going to step. Now you can see that it just takes 10 to 11 steps to reach the minimum point. Okay. Learning rate, what it actually does is it determines how much my weight value is going to be updated. Okay. I'll just show you in the formula, but so just to have an idea. So the thing is, as you can see, when I'm having a higher learning rate, I'm learning it faster. So you can think that I can have very high learning rate. So what would be the problem that time is you will be going randomly. See, this is the minimum point, but you are just wavering here and there. So you need to find the right learning rate to actually reach the optimal point in very fast time. And there are many texts like scheduled learning rate, and there are many things that are quite advanced. This is the basic thing. What we do is consider the objective is this is a simple function. We have the input and we have the output. Our objective is to find the values which maps the input and the output. We don't know actually the values. So what we do is we try to iterate the values and get the right value for the particular function. Okay. I hope this is quite clear, but we'll iterate more on this. Okay. Okay. This is the loss function. So this is nothing but our prediction. Okay. Mx plus b, which is our formula, which is our prediction. Why is the actual output? So the difference between the prediction and the actual output is called the loss. Okay, it's also a cost function. Okay, our objective is to reduce the cost function. Okay, so this is the cost. Okay, this is the loss, which is considered to be f. Okay, consider it, and we are going to see the loss with respect to m and with respect to b. So you might be knowing about different derivative. So what is df by dm? Rate of change of f with respect to m. In our scenario, it is the rate of change of the loss with respect to m value and rate of change of loss with respect to b value. Our objective is to reduce the loss. Okay, so we find that how much the m value affects the loss, and we move the m value accordingly to reduce the loss as much as possible. Okay, so in this example, we are just saying M and B, which are just two parameters that we are changing the value. In neural networks, there will be a lot of parameters that we will be actually tuning. Okay, so if you're able to understand this, we'll be able to build on top of it. Okay, that's the reason why we are starting linear regression and we are just going on higher level concepts. Okay, so this is how we actually update the M value. So M value, as I said, it can be any random value. Okay, in the beginning. After that, what you do is you actually find the derivative rate of change of f with respect to m, and we see the learning LR. LR is nothing but the learning rate, which we saw in the over here. So if you're able to understand it, we are updated at each point. Okay. And similarly, we'll be doing it for the B also. Okay, fine. So think is, what we'll be actually doing is, when the slope is, when you see that, map this diagram to this diagram. Okay. So when you, as you can see, the slope over here is negative. So when you draw, you can't draw a slope for can't find the slope of a curve. You have to find the slope for a particular point alone. Okay. So at this particular point, when you draw a tangent line to it, you get the slope of it. So as you can see, at this point, the slope is negative. So when the slope is negative, we actually get we do the add by the negative of this thing. Okay, so we actually will be moving in that direction. Okay, at this point, the slope is actually positive. We are moving in this direction. Okay, so what we'll be doing is we'll be reducing the value of W, which is weight. At this point, we'll be increasing the value of W. Okay, I hope you are getting it, but we'll try to make it even more clear. Okay, just reply in the comment section whether you have any problems, or I'll try to answer it in the Q&A session. Okay, since these things are quite mathematical, but these are essential to understand how actually gradient descent works. Okay, which is the underlying concept of back propagation. Okay, fine. As you can see at this tangent, when we are actually reducing, the tangent is negative. When you are actually increasing, the tangent will be positive. Okay, so what we do is, we actually, when the value is actually reducing, we go in that direction. When the value is increasing, we don't go in that direction, we try to go in the opposite direction. Okay, that's the reason for negative over here. And learning rate is to determine how much we are going to update each time the derivative. So okay, this is the fundamentals of linear regression, how it actually able to fit the loss, fit the far line. So when we are going to reduce the loss error, end of the day we'll be fitting the best line possible. Okay. Is it clear till now? Do you have any issues? I know the audio is a bit delayed, so but I'll wait for some time so that you can reply. So I can get a feedback whether we are going on track. You can reply in the comments. Okay, fine. I'll proceed. So sigmoid function is nothing but it's a non-linearity. Okay. So as you can see, we are just able to draw a straight line with linear regression. Okay. What actually we need is real world data is not linear. It is non-linear. Okay. So we need non-linear functions to actually learn these non-linearities. Okay. Fine. Sigmoid function is nothing but the t is a linear function. We just applied the sigmoid to it. So let's consider what it does is it quantifies the data between -infinity to +infinity, between 0 and 1. How it actually does is, let's consider you're substituting the value of infinity over here. So e power minus infinity can be considered as 0. So anything divided by, okay, which is 0. Okay, e power minus infinity makes it 0. So 1 divided by 1 is 1, which gets our maximum positive value. Similarly, consider negative infinity. E power negative infinity is e power infinity, which is infinity. Anything divided by infinity is 0. So we get the minimum value. Let's consider midpoint 0. So e power 0 is nothing but 1. So 1 divided by 2 is 0.5. That is the midpoint. So it changes the range between -infinity to +infinity to 0 to 1. Okay. This is essential because we need non-linearity in our data. So you can have as many linear data as possible, like 3x plus 4 is equal to 5, 5x plus 8 is equal to 7. You can have many non-linear linear equations, but I can sum it all together and make it as one linear equation. So it doesn't matter how many linear equations you have. You cannot learn complex functions. You need non-linearity to learn this, and I'll be showing it in visually the upcoming things. Okay, so these are the various nonlinearities. Sigmoid, that the thing we saw 1 by 1 plus e power minus 6. Real is also one common one. Okay, it ranges from, if it's less than 0, it makes it as 0. If it is negative, it is 0. If it is positive, it is the same value. Okay, this is how the diagram would be. Leaky ReLU is a small difference in it. Okay, these are various activation functions that are used commonly. So why activation functions and non-linear is important? Look at this data, classification data. So it is, as you can see, it is impossible to classify this data using a linear function. You need non-linearity. What I mean by non-linear is, it should not be a straight line. It should have curves or something. Okay, this is a non-linear function because it is not a single straight line. It is changing in at this point. Okay, it should not be monotonous and should not be a straight line. That's the thing I'm trying to say in sense of non-linearity. So we need non-linear data to actually classify these kind of models, these kinds of data. Okay. Okay, fine. So I guess you're seeing no problem. So I'll continue with my slides. So I'll get with neural networks. So neural networks are nothing but, you have many each layer is connected to all the neurons in the upcoming layers. Okay, that is dense neural networks. So what we do is, we have many input features. Okay, let's consider predicting saying whether it's a cat or the dog. Okay, or we have two classes. So what we do is, we give the input features like height, whether it has whiskers or not, and whether the color of the thing. Okay, so or what it eats. Those are the inputs that you have. Okay, based on this, many operations are done in between. You don't actually say what to actually happen over here. Okay, and finally we get the output whether it's a cat or the dog. Okay, in neural networks, the input, the values, all these lines are values. Okay, W, we say weights. In the linear equation, we ask this one weight. In this, we have many weights. So in this particular model, we have 3 into 4, which is 12, plus each of the here 4 into 2, which is 8, which is 20, plus each neuron has its own bias. Okay, so plus 4 plus 2, which makes it 26 weights over here. Okay, so we have so many parameters that we can actually tune. Okay, fine. So I'll try to show it visually so that you have better understanding. Okay, so we'll go to search neural network playground. Neural network playground. So it actually runs in the browser. So it gives a very clear intuition on what actually happens. Okay. So we are not going to code right now, but what we do is, this is a classification problem. As you can see, it's a classification problem, and we have to classify between the blue class and the orange class. Okay. And you have many things like how to split the training and testing thing. So I didn't cover these things because these things are quite basics in machine learning. So covering those things would be repetitive. So it needed, because you need not overfit the data. Those things are, so you need a separate training and testing data. You can determine the split of it. Okay. So these are as you can see, these are the features that it can learn. We have the input. Okay, input X, which is X and Y, and we have the input. These are the hidden neurons. Okay. And each neuron, we can see the weight value is 0.43 over here, and each connection has a weight. Like similarly, in our Fahrenheit case, we had the weight of 1.8. Okay, 1.8 and 3.2, which is the bias. Similarly, each connection has a weight over here. The value that we are going to actually learn is these weight values, which helps us to fit this data set. Okay. And then we have two classes, the blue class and the orange class. So this is a particular feature. It is a linear. What it does is, it just draws a linear line. Okay, it is not able to draw a non-linear line. Okay, all these things are just linear lines. Okay, and you can see activation over here. We talked about ReLU, TANH, sigmoid, all these things. Defaultly it's ReLU, TANH will have it as this. In this diagram, we can see some non-linearity. This non-linearity is due to the TANH, which is the activation function. Okay. So let's start the epoch. Epoch is how many times it sees the data set completely. So if it's one epoch, it has seen the data once completely. Okay. And learning rate, we saw how much it's going to update in each epoch. Those things are this. And batch size, and batch size determined for how many batch it's going to update the value. Okay. So I'll just run it and we'll just talk about later. Okay, just concentrate on this particular weight, 0.43, which is the starting weight. Let's see how it changes after we are training it. So as you can see, it is able to clearly segregate the two classes. In the beginning, this weight value was 0.43. Now it's 0.63. The weight value has been updated. Similarly, all the weight values are mostly updated. We are not manually updating these weight values, but looking at the data, it is finding its own patterns to actually predict the data. As you can see, these are linear. A simple neuron is just a linear line. Okay, but with the help of activation function, we are able to find non-linear things. Okay, is it? Okay, there is one question like why ReLUs prefer over other activation function. There are many reasons for it. Like it is quite easy to compute, and in neural networks, it's especially in the in-between layers, it's very productive. I'll answer these questions at the end of the session. These are good questions. I will answer them in the end. Okay. And we can also, this is quite a simple model, so simple data set, we are able to classify it easily. Okay, so we had some intuitions, right? So setting the very low learning rate takes a long time to find. So let's check it out. So I'm reinitiating it. So I'm having a very small learning rate. Let's see how much time it takes to learn. It's taking a very long time. You can see the loss over here. The loss is reducing very slowly. It's gone 3,400 epochs, but it's still not, any progress is not showing. Okay, let's have a slightly higher learning rate. And I'm resetting it. See, this is the test loss and the training loss. Okay, it's 0.5. Let's see what it's changing after training it. As you can see, the loss is reducing. Slightly it's reducing. You can see the underlying pattern over here. So the values are changing and different patterns are learned. And the loss is right now 0.032. In the beginning it was 0.5. So it's actually learning. Okay. So this is how it's actually learning. So we had few assumptions, right? So without non-linearity, we cannot learn non-linear data. Okay. So I'm keeping the linear activation linear. I'm having the same learning rate. All the other things are same. Okay. All this number of neurons, output, all these things are same. Let's see whether I'm able to learn. See, I'm not able to learn because I don't have a non-linear, because all these things just can draw straight line, and without non-linear activation I can't make a non-linear output. Okay, so end of the day my loss would be very high. Okay, I'm not changing anything else. I'm just changing the non-linear function, this time ReLU. Okay, now I am able to actually learn the data. Okay, as you can see, the boundaries are quite different because it's because of ReLU, but it's able to learn it. Okay, is it clear? Am I making sense? Are you able to follow up? Just put down in the comments. Okay, fine. Okay, and let's see another simple data. Okay, this is actually a linearly separable data. I can easily draw a line and separate it. Here I am using a linear activation. I can easily separate it. Okay, but for non-linear data, I will not be able to separate it. Okay, I'll try with this thing. See, I'm not able to reduce the loss, but by using a non-linear function, I'll be able to easily do it. Okay, fine. This one thing, and the kind of features that you learn are linear over here. It's either straight line or thing. If you add non-linearity in the kind of features you learn, okay, I'm learning non-linear features over here. So these neurons itself can learn non-linearity. Using this, even if I have a linear function, if my features, if I'm able to learn non-linear data, I'll be able to make this output. I should be able to do it with some. Let me add some more kind of non-linearity. Okay, let me just start training. Okay, I'm just reinitializing it. I've added non-linear features to learn. Let's see what happens. So the thing we are doing X bar and Y things that you are giving features that you are allowing it to learn. Let's see how it converges. For these features not able to converge. Okay. I'll add another feature like sin x. Okay. Let's see what happens, right? So there are many things that you can play around, okay? So just to have intuition. All these things can be coded also. We'll be having some small demos on it. But just to give you, just to play around and get a feel of it, you can play with this online terminal, okay? I'll share the links of this. You can just search it, Google it. Okay, I'm adding this non-linearity. This exactly fits the data. It should be able to learn it in seconds. Okay, let's try this with this data. I'm using a linear activation, but I'm trying to learn. It is able to do it because I have non-linear features that I can learn. Okay, and let's try this complex feature. This is quite difficult to actually learn, so it might take some time. Keep this like this, and before that, I'll just also do a regression problem. So also regression problem like fitting the data. You can also try these things, okay? And you can also determine the amount of training data and test data. So showing training data, the color which are bolded are training data and the normal ones are test data. You can also add noise. So in this thing, there's a clear boundary that I can draw. But real world data has noise. There cannot be a clear boundary. So what happens when I increase the noise? There are already some oranges which actually are in blue area. Okay, so you can play around with these things. Okay, fine. I hope this makes sense. And you can, if you have any doubts, you can ask me in the sections. Okay, fine. This was to give an overview. Our end goal is to find the what the end goal is. There are many weight values. Okay. When you start the epoch, these weight values are completely random. In this particular example, we have many weight values. Like we are giving six inputs. Okay, 6 into 4, which is 24, plus each one has its own bias. 28, and for 28 plus 4 into another 8, which is 36 plus 2, which is 40 weight param values that we can change, which updates by itself. Okay, so that's the reason why we are able to learn complex mapping. Okay, fine. Okay, we covered those things. I'll get back to my slides. Okay, back propagation is how neural networks actually learn. Okay, we saw one thing over here that df by dm, rate of change of f with respect to m, which is a cost function. Okay, in this scenario, we have direct connection. The cost was directly connected with the variables that we are going to change. Okay, parameters that we are going to change. But in neural network, as you can see, there are many layers. So output is over here, but the output is affected by this layer also. Okay, so there is no direct connection. This output is affected by this output, which is indirect affected by this output. Okay, so there are connections, and we have to learn these things. How we are actually doing is using chain rule. You may be knowing that. I'll just draw the rules. Just a second. We'll try to end the session by 2:15 so that after that we can take on the session questions. So we'll be having like D. No, okay. So let's consider cost is df. Okay. First we had df by dm. Okay, derivative of f with respect to m, partial derivative to be precise. In this scenario, we have like this is connected to another node. So this is how our neural network is, right? Let's take a simple example. This is connected to the other node. Okay. So the change of this with respect to this. So this is f. Let's consider this to be m. Okay, this to be a1, a2. Okay, df by dm gives the rate of change of the output with respect to m. Okay, we need also to change the values of da1 and a2. So df by da1 is nothing but we know the chain rule, which is df by dm into dm by dA1. So what we do is we calculate the rate of change of f with respect to m, and then we calculate the rate of change of m with respect to a. This is called as chain rule, and we use this to update each value. Okay, that's what backpropagation does. I hope this is clear. Okay, fine. If you have any doubts, you can ask me in the end of the session. Just close this. Just a second. Okay, this is a similar example. So this is df of f. Okay, this function with respect to itself. So which one? So we have a over here, x over here, y over here. So df by dy is rate of change of f with respect to y. But rate of change of f with respect to c is nothing but rate of change of f with respect to y into rate of change of y with respect to c. Okay, fine. So that's how these things work. Okay, neural networks are able to learn by themselves, so we should also try to learn like that. Okay, fine. We saw these example. So I'll just show you a small example of using neural networks. We are going to use TensorFlow with Keras API. Keras is a higher level API which helps us to make models simply. Okay, very easy. So sequential helps us to stack layers on top of each other. So actually, what our input would be is 28 cross 28 black and white image. Okay, so we'll flatten it to make it a single dimensional array of 786. After that, in next layer, we are saying that we are going to have 128 neurons. In this, we had 4 neurons, right? Like similarly, we are saying that our input features is going to be 786. Okay, our next layer is going to be 128. After that, we are going to have a layer of hidden layer of another 10, which is out. Actually, in our case, is going to be output layer. So we are actually designing the structure. Okay, over here it's quite simple. Keras.sequential, Keras.layers.dense. Dense means that each neuron in the next layer is connected to the neuron in the previous layer. It's densely connected. Okay. After that, we will be determining the loss. Okay. So we are in our linear regression problem. We calculate the loss mean squared error, the distance between the actual prediction and the our prediction. Okay. And again, is a metric, and Adam is kind of optimizer. Adam, we saw gradient descent. Okay, Adam are variations of kind of optimizers are better suited for neural networks. We have Adam, we have RMS prop, we have other kind of optimizers that we use a lot. Okay, and finally we fit. This fit function is similar to sklearn fit. Okay, we give the training images, we give the labels, we give the number of epochs, which is similar to this thing. Okay, how many times it sees the entire data, and it gets the fitting, it does the training. After that, we can use the trained model to make the predictions. Okay, fine. We just see the code example over here. So to iterate to this code example, go to TensorFlow and go to tutorials. In that, we have basic classification with Keras. Okay, that you can just go run with Google Colab. So there will be many explanations given over here. Those things are quite unnecessary for us. Okay, right now you can read this repo very slowly later. Most of these things are just visualizing the data and those things which are not very essential right now. The thing is, when you're going to solve a problem, understanding the data and playing with the data is very important. Okay, as well as the playing with the model. You have to understand the model and the data both. For right now, we are just considering the data model structure alone. But later you can read the repo completely and just running all the cells. Okay, just to show you how the output. So this is the example. Okay, this is the training example that we are using. MNIST is nothing but 28 plus 28 different classes of fashion images like shoe, shirt, cap, similar like things like that. These are 10 classes that we have. Okay, what we do is the input size are 28 cross 28. The number of examples are 60,000. Okay, training example, text examples are 10,000. So totally we have 70,000 images. So the reason why we have training example and text example is that if we train only using the entire model, we can overfit. Overfit is similar to what you mugging up. So you can mug a max problem and you can get the right answer, but you'll not be able to answer a new question which is given. Similarly, you can mock the data set and get the right results. But when a new data set given, which in the production, you will not be able to answer it correctly. Okay, that's the issue that we have. So some visualizations of how the image, what the data set is all about. So this is the part that we are seeing. So we are creating the structure. So input is 28 plus 28. What Flatten does is, it makes it into a 1D array, 2D array to 1D array of 784. Okay. After that, we are using dense. The actuation that we are using is ReLU. Okay. I'll be answering why ReLU is preferred. Okay. And finally we have 10 classes. Okay. 10 output, because we have the number of output classes is 10. We are using the optimizer Adam over here. All these things are seen in the PPT itself. We are using categorical cross entropy. Okay, because we have 10 categories, so that's the reason why we are using categorical cross entropy over here. If it was a regressive problem, we are using mean square error or something like that, mean absolute error, or there are many errors like that we can use. And I'm fitting the data. As you can see, epoch, I'm using 10 epoch. So at each epoch, it iterates to the entire data set. Okay. And you can see that the 2.ms is the number of time it takes for each step. Okay. And finally, we are evaluating it using the test images. We get an accuracy around 88. Okay. We got rating accuracy around 91. So we have a 3% drop, but it's quite fine. It's not very much overfitting. Okay. So this is a simple example. So the concept that we are let's consider we have the training example set. Okay. What we do is we create this model. A model is created. Okay. And we determine the structure of the model. It can be 28, and you can also add another layer over here. Okay. I can simply add. Okay. So there might be one question like how to actually determine the number of neurons or number of things that I should be having, the number of nodes that I should be having at each layer, or how many layers that I actually should be having. So these are hyperparameters that you actually tune. There is no one right answer. Okay. So depending upon your data set, these values changes. Fine. So the model is training. So we are getting. So the thing is, putting a very large model can cause overfitting. Let's see what actually happens. It's training, and we are reaching around 90% accuracy right now. Let's see what happens in the remaining 3 epochs. Is there not going to be much of a change, or I guess there's not going to be much of change over here. Let's see. So we are past 91% accuracy right now, but this is the training accuracy. It's not the validation accuracy. Validation accuracy is more important. We can even have 100% training accuracy by overfitting. So it has slightly increased. The previous validation accuracy was 88. Okay, 88.38. Let's see what's the validation accuracy. Now it's 87. The test accuracy has reduced, increased, but the validation accuracy has decreased. Because since the model is quite big right now, it's overfitting a bit. Okay, we can play around with these things and determine what is the right value to go around. Okay, fine. That's the end of the session. So since I had a short amount of time, I didn't cover in depth into the math and the calculus of deep learning. There are many resources, and deeplearning.ai is a wonderful place where I actually started to learn deep learning. So you can enroll in it and learn. Okay. One thing is, before diving deep into deep learning, the concepts like overfitting and regularization, validation, and there are many concepts that are common to machine learning and deep learning. Okay. So to get understanding of those things, first understanding machine learning and then getting into deep learning is quite preferable. Okay. That would be my suggestion. And you can also learn it parallelly, but it's a good way to start with some basics of machine learning and then go into deep learning a bit. The thing is, learning machine learning has still value right now, because many business analytics companies require to understanding of the tabular data and why they are making such predictions. Okay, so that's the reason learning both is essential. And deep learning is growing rapidly. Many state-of-the-art models are coming right now, and you are seeing groundbreaking applications and results in it. Okay, so it's a wonderful time to get into the industry. But if you are going to do it full time, you should understand the fundamentals behind it solidly. Okay, so these are the contact details of myself. So You can. I'm a co-founder and instructor at polydimensional.in. So if you like the way I'm teaching, I'll be conducting a machine learning course end to end in it. So you can visit the website over here. You can also connect with me at my LinkedIn, which is my10k7. I also have my contact number. So that's it for today. Thank you. If you have any other queries, you can put it in the comment section, and I'll be answering it one by one. Okay. This. Bro, is it only from the comment section or is it also from the docs? Is there any questions in the docs?
Yeah, we have pasted everything in the docs. You can just check that.
Okay, just a second. So that I'll just. Okay, fine. Okay, I'll just stop my. Okay, I'll just answer. So one question is why ReLU is preferred over other activations. So as you can see, the calculating ReLU is quite simple. You just take the max of the 0 and that number. So it's computationally efficient, and it's also empirically proved that in deep learning and neural networks, ReLU works better in between layers. In final layers, we go for softmax or sigmoid in case of binary classification and multi-classification. Okay, that's one thing. I'm studying ML course by Andrew Ng, but it's using Octave and MATLAB. But as the course is quite, the thing is, Andrew Ng has released this 2019 course in YouTube recently. The assignments are in Python. You can prefer it. And as I said, I'm also conducting a ML course in my website polydimensional.in. You can refer it, and you can just search polydimensional.in, or you can check it out in my LinkedIn. So from there you can learn machine learning, which is very updated. I try to get all the recent things that are needed for Kaggle competitions and those things, and I'm putting them all in one place, so you can follow that. Okay. And Andrew Ng's machine learning course in YouTube is also one great thing. I'll just show you in a minute. So this is a very previous one, 2019. So there is a lecture series of 2018, which is released very recently, 1 month ago. You can also watch this to be very updated. This is on with Python. Okay, fine. Any other questions? I'll just check the docs. Okay, SGD versus Adam. So SGD is kind of it's not a stochastic gradient descent. Is used for simple things, but Adam, what it does is it tries to reach the global minima. Okay, SGD can get stuck in local minima. Adam has prevalent to it. Adam and RMS prop. What it does is it uses iterative moves. Okay, it just does not consider this move alone. It uses the direction in which it has moved for such a long time. A concept called momentum is used in these things. Okay. You can have a look in detail. I'll try to cover, and the courses of Andrew Ng covers them in detail. Okay, you can check it out. Okay, any other questions? I'll check the doc for a minute. Just a second. By the way, how was the session so far? Was it useful or was I a bit fast? Please leave the comments and feedbacks so that I can improve in my upcoming sessions. Okay. Is it possible to get it? Is it possible to get a F1 score greater than 99 on a small data set without overfitting? It depends upon the data set. If your data set is kind of the thing is if the data set is a representative of the entire model, okay. So the data set can be, sometimes you have a data set and it might not be a very representative model. Like you collect data in one particular region, like one particular region, but the general population might not be having such a data, okay. That distribution might be different. So even if you are having very good fit in that particular data, in general population might be having some problem. So the thing is, it depends upon the data set and the model that you use, and sometimes it might be possible. Okay. Any other questions? I guess the first 4 questions are answered. Is there any other?
Yes, those are all the questions.
Okay. That's it from my side. Yeah, it was a nice hosting, and thanks for staying for such a late time also.
Thank
Yeah.
you for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Yeah,
much for
sure.
giving us your time, and I also learned quite a lot of things from your session.
Okay, that's good to know. And thanks for hosting us. Thanks a lot. Okay,
Yeah,
sure. Yeah, go. See you sometime in some other event.
yeah,
Sure.
sure.
Bye, bro.
Bye. So all the attendees which are here, like you have to fill one feedback form. So I'll be pasting it in the chat section. So in case you are not from our college, like the Mesco college, you can, if you don't have the Coursera course with you for the deep learning specialization, you can just fill in the form, and you can get 50% off on the all the courses on Coursera, on the deep learning courses on Coursera. And for those people who have the subscription with them, they can just go in and they can type deep learning AI, and you can learn all the things that are taught today. So yeah, that's it. So please fill the form, and thank you very much for joining in. We'll be sharing this live session on our YouTube channel. You can come here and you can revisit it if you want to refresh or anything like that. So thank you very much for joining, and good night.